LinkedIn Live. So thrilled, really, to have Dr. Ruth Gotian here with me. I have wanted to meet her forever, and now she has this terrific new book, The Success Factor. And I haven't had a lot of authors on, but I think this book in particular is one that you'll find really useful, and certainly Ruth, someone who has a lot of knowledge about what it takes to be successful. So I'm just going to move us here so that we're both on screen. Hi, Ruth.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I could call you Dr. Ruth, but that moniker has been taken.
Yes, we have a lot of similarities, but
Yeah.
we research different things.
Great, great. I'd like first just to say about you that you're the Chief Learning Officer at the Weill Cornell Medicine Group. You have been recently chosen by Thinkers 50 as the recipient of the Thinkers 50 Radar Award, which makes you the #1 emerging management thinker. Yet another reason I'm thrilled to have you on today and to learn more about your work. But maybe you could just talk first a little bit about what does it mean to be a Chief Learning Officer? Because that's a title that I don't see as often as some others.
Yes, it's really a lot of professional development, and the way I see it is that it's my job to make people successful. So I do a lot of that with the professional development, but I take a different approach than most because I do have an academic background. My doctorate is in adult learning and leadership. So I use what we call the pedagogy for adults, which is andragogy.
Yeah.
I actually use that and embed that in how we do things. And it's really based on the latest research and the latest techniques. So, not, I saw something at a conference, let's try it. It's
Yeah.
actually anchored in theory.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, speaking of research, your book, The Success Factor, which is subtitled Developing the Mindset and Skill for Peak Business Performance, which is something we're all interested in. You feature a lot of interesting anecdotes in there, but it's based on research that you did. So back to being based on research. And you talked to some serious high performers. You talked to astronauts and Olympic champions and Nobel laureates. How did you choose the people that you interviewed and used for your research?
This is deep, deep research that has been going on for years and years and years, so much so that my doctoral dissertation was on it. And at that time, I looked at the most successful physician scientist of our generation. And since that time, I have actually in, really enhanced that work to include the astronauts and the Olympic champions and NBA champions and other people of that caliber. And what I quickly realized was that what I found in those Nobel Prize winning scientists were the same elements of success I found in the astronauts and the Olympians. And that's when I realized that this is really a learned skill. And if it's a learned skill, I'm an adult educator, so I know how to teach these things. Now, I have been blessed to be part of several think tanks, and my work with the successful physician scientists and the Nobel Prize winners, because of where I work, I had access and I knew many of them. So that wasn't a problem. But then being part of the think tank allowed me, I was surrounded all of a sudden with astronauts. I got to meet those people and then slowly CEOs and Olympians. And when people know, like, and trust you and know that you will do good work with their story, they start to trust you. And people at that level, it's a very tight knit and small community, right? As you start going up that pyramid of success, it gets narrower and narrower. And when people find someone who they really can trust, they start recommending them to other people. Why don't you try talking to my friend so and so? And that's really how it just snowballed, is that I knew a few people. They must have liked my work with what I'd done so far, and it just snowballed from there.
Yeah, I'm sure they liked your work. You also earned their trust for them to make a referral at any level, right? A referral is just a platinum source of trust, and
That's
always
key.
grateful for those. But you definitely earned it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Let's talk about a little more about the book itself. So you teased out, or maybe they hit you in the face, I don't know, but there were 4 attributes
Yeah.
that you compiled into what you call the success factor. And I found most fascinating, beyond the factors themselves, that it's important to do them all at once.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about those factors and the doing it all at once?
That's right. So these are the same four things in the astronauts and the Nobel Prize winners and the NBA champions and the Olympic champions. And when I realized that they do all four of this, then that was my aha moment. I realized we're onto something. So the four things, you're right, they have to be done in tandem. The first one is tap into what we call in adult learning your intrinsic motivation, what comes from within, what you were put on this earth to do. This is not you find your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. That's nice, but this is more than that. This is why you were put on this earth. You can't not do it. That's what that's about, right? It's not about the medals, the diplomas, the awards. That's extrinsic motivation. That is when other people are judging your work, and that is hard to sustain long term. But when it comes from the inside, when that fire comes from within inside, that's intrinsic motivation. And you want to spend a lifetime pouring gasoline on that fire because that's really going to catapult you to success. That's number one. You could have all the talent and you can have the passion, but if you don't work at it, the work ethic, the perseverance, the tenacity, the grit, the resilience, whatever you want to call it, it's not going to have the same impact. Now, it's not about working 18-hour days. It's about working smarter, not just harder. Figuring out how to leverage your peak hours of the day, figuring out how to turn challenges into opportunities. In fact, all of these high achievers, they never question if they'll overcome a challenge. Never. They know that they'll overcome the challenge. Instead, they focus on how to overcome the challenge. What is that strategy I haven't thought of yet in order to get this to happen? Now, once you start doing that, it's no longer up to chance. You are controlling what you can control. You are now in the driver's seat. And when you're in the driver's seat, it's all up to you. Well, now you really want to put pedal to the metal because now you know that you can create change, right? So it's how you're dealing with those challenges. Number two.
Just
Number three.
sort of how and when, right? And I can imagine that that is wind in the sails because of the confidence that that would engender in someone. And you don't spend all of this energy and time, thought on can I do this or not, right? It's just how and when will I do it? That's wonderful.
They feel they need to try. And in fact, one of the sentiments that kept coming up over and over and over again is that they fear not trying more than they fear failing. They're okay with failing. As long as nobody dies, they're okay with failing because that's a learning opportunity. But not trying is not something they can do. That's not something they can live with.
Certainly something many of us could learn from. Yeah.
For sure.
All right.
For sure.
So that's two. What are 3 and 4?
The third one is a strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. What they did early in their career, they do later on in their career. Every time in October when the Nobel Prizes are announced, and I'm one of those people that wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning to hear the announcement, you see pictures going viral on Twitter of here's someone who just won the Nobel Prize and still had a lab meeting, is still teaching the class, still submitting a grant. It's what worked for them early in their career. It's what will work later in their career. They never give up that foundation. They continue to do it. In fact, long track speed skater Bonnie Blair, for those who remember her from the Winter Olympics, she won multiple medals. And at that time, her biggest competitors were the East Germans, right? It's when Germany was split.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said that their thighs were like tree trunks. She said, I'm never going to be able to compete with their power. So what she did was she went back to one of her earlier coaches to work on the basics. She said, I can't beat them on power, but I can beat them on technique. And she went back to the technique. And that's how she won multiple gold medals. Multiple. So that was 3. Last but not least is all of these people, despite all of their accolades that they have, they're constantly opening their mind up to new knowledge. They're looking at what can I learn from one industry, use it in another industry in a slightly different way, because that's innovation. Or what are these different things that I'm hearing and how can I connect dots in a way that other people don't even see yet? Now, in order to be able to connect dots that other people don't see, you have to open your mind up to new knowledge. Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, They read 3 to 8 hours a day. They're notorious for that. That's how they're gaining new knowledge. But there's so many other ways you can do that. You can read articles. I know the two of us write for Forbes. You can watch LinkedIn Live. Hopefully, we're sharing good stuff here. LinkedIn Learning has great courses, articles, podcasts, webinars. It's endless if you actually want to learn more. Now, one of the ways also is to talk to other people, and not just any people. All of the extreme high achievers actually surrounded themselves with a team of mentors who believed in them more than they believed in themselves. That's how to do it.
Yeah.
But you got to do all of them.
Which is more confidence. Yeah. Could you give an example of how someone is doing all of them all at once?
So you can't pick and choose. You can't say, today I'm going to work hard, but next week I'm going to remember to go back to doing the foundational skills, and maybe I'll listen to a podcast next month. It doesn't work that way. It's constantly doing all of those things together. And when you start doing it, it becomes so seamless, it just becomes part of your routine, such as putting on your shoes. You don't even think about it anymore. You just start to do it. It becomes part of who you are. And what's so great about that is once you start doing it, success is the best addiction to have. But it's
I
also
love that phrase.
infectious.
I love that phrase, Ruth. Success is the best addiction. There you are.
It's the best addiction, and it's also infectious, and it's contagious. So what happens is when there are other people surrounding you, they want to learn from that. How can I do that? Now, all of a sudden, the bar of what is excellence has been raised. There is a new baseline, there's a new norm, and it's higher than it's ever been. And when people start seeing that, they want to bring in their friends who are other high achievers. All of a sudden, you have this ecosystem of high achievers working together. Now, high achievers are 400% more productive than the average employee. So you can have fewer people doing amazing work, but you've got to give them the room to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so often we see in organizations, especially I think as they get larger, that we stop giving people the room to be as successful as they could be, right?
Yeah, sadly.
But yes, quite sadly. Well, that's so intrinsic motivation, perseverance, strong foundation, and constant learning through informal means, right?
That's
so,
right.
Not just I'm going to take this course on Tuesdays at 10, but I'm going to take in information any way that I can. So, love that.
From different industries and different people. So in fact, the Nobel Prize winner has no problem learning something from someone who just finished college. If that person is the most knowledgeable person about a topic who's in the room who can help them at that time. They're open to it. They're totally okay with that.
Yeah, great. So it's about supporting whatever it is that they need to do, and just being completely open to whatever the best way is to do that. So it's
That's right.
low defensive, low ego approach, which is not as common as it could be, and is always, I think, a better path for leadership and for success. So you also identified sort of 4 different ways, if I kept count as I went through the book, of that we can do in order to do this. And you spoke briefly about one of those early, which was identifying your passion. I think about my mother, who was born knowing she wanted to be a nurse. And sure enough, she grew up, she was a nurse. It was all goodness. But for most of us, and certainly for most of the people that I'm coaching and working with, that wasn't the case. We're sort of figuring it out as we go. How do people go about identifying their passion?
That's right. And in fact, you raise a great point, because I don't just want to tell people what to do to be successful. I'm an adult educator, so I have to teach people how to do it. So I actually created a buffet of options for each of the 4 elements of success. And the reason I did that, Karen, is because what works for you is not going to work for me, because we're different people, right? I don't have a twin who's just like me. And what works for me today may not work for me the next time I have a transition, a new job, a move, a pandemic. So there needed to be options so that we can always go back and look at this. So for each one of those 4 elements, I talk about ways that you can try and implement it. realizing that something's going to work for you and something different might work for
Mm.
me. And that's why I also, and each one has a separate chapter, I also realize that people learn differently. So while a lot of this stuff is you read it, there's also with the book these online resources that you can
Mm.
download, because I understand that 70% of adults are visual learners and they want to be able to see it and write on it and interact with it. And that's why it was so important to me to have those worksheets that people can download and manipulate in a way that works for them.
What a wonderful set of resources. And I think this is part of why I'm so excited about this book. There's the research, there's the social proof of who you researched, and then there's all of your skills as an adult
Yeah.
educator to help us understand it and help us do something with it. So managing time and energy, I think particularly this time of year, is something that people pay a lot of attention to. What are some of your suggestions for how we can do that better?
My go-to suggestions. I think everyone needs to know their peak performance hours. And this is what all the high
Mm.
achievers have really understood, excuse me, and underscored. So, for example, I am a morning person. I wake up very early in the morning before anyone else. I have my coffee and I'm ready to go. And in fact, I am more focused in the morning and can get more done by 11 o'clock in the morning than I can the rest of the day, which means all of my active tasks, my deep cognitive focus tasks that really require me to focus are going to happen during those peak hours, which for me are in the morning. And this is why you can't copy somebody else's habits. Because if I want to wake up and start working at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, but you didn't go to sleep until 2 to 3 in the morning, you're not going to all of a sudden be a morning person if you're a night owl. So it's not about copying the habits, it's understanding the mindset of figuring out when your peak hours are and leveraging that. So if you know your peak hours are in the morning, that's when you do your deep focus work. I see so many people who schedule deep focus work during the remnants of the time on their calendar. How can you work on command like that? Do deep focus work on command? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work and you'll get frustrated. So save your focus hours for the deep cognitive work that require that focus, which for me is writing and editing and budgets, and do your passive tasks, which for me are Zooms and emails, during the time of the day when you're a little slower, not quite as sharp, maybe a little tired, maybe in need of a shot of caffeine, which for me is the late afternoon. So those Zoom meetings, with very rare exception, usually happen in the afternoon, not in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you giving us some of your morning time today. Really that's really great. But you're right. People give up, right?
Yeah.
When I talk to people about scheduling, you have to take control of your calendar. No one else is going to
Yeah.
schedule sort of the big thinking, strategic time for you. They're going to schedule more tactical tasks for the most part, and you have to control your calendar because if you're not, someone else is, and they're not going to be
That's
putting
right.
the things on there that are the big picture things. But they're like, okay, from 2 to 3 o'clock on Tuesdays, I'm going to have big thoughts, and of course, it doesn't work
Yeah.
that way, right? I'm not saying no one ever had a big thought at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, but that's typically not the time. So, what sort of resource is available for people at your online resources link to help them manage time and energy, for example?
There's so much there. So I actually offer within the book, there's actually a goal audit, which I think is an extremely useful tool. I talk to people about what their goals are. And then I ask them, how many task forces, committees, and special projects are you on? Let's start listing every single one of them, even if they only meet once a quarter. And people are coming with double digits. And I said, and how many of these are related to your goals? We can cut out 80, 90% of those activities. Oh, but important people are there. Would they notice if you weren't there? Because if they don't notice that you're not there, you don't need to be there.
Yeah.
So I tell people if it doesn't align, you must resign. At the very least, take a leave of absence because it is not serving your goal. Now, certainly you have to be a good citizen of your organization and department, but there's a limit to how many of those things that you need to do, especially if it's not helping you, and the scales are not exactly balanced. So
Yeah.
definitely try doing a goal audit as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There's just this big difference between what you can do and what you should do. And
Yeah,
I think that's a question people should ask themselves before they say yes. And too often we're just too quick to say, yes, of course I will.
that's
And
right.
then we end up with the calendar situation that you're describing. So,
That's right.
yeah. What would you say about your book overall in summary in terms of your goals for the book? Maybe from the beginning to sort of the success you're having now with it. And
Yes.
I'd also love to know how people can, where can they find the book and how can they learn more about you and your work?
Yeah. So the book, I'm so excited. It's called The
It's
Success
beautiful.
Factor. Thank you. It's available wherever you love buying books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, wherever you love buying books. It's actually available all over the world. And if you want to know where all over the world you can actually get it, if you just go to my website, ruthgotian.com/book, you'll see places all over the world where you can buy it. Big box retailers, independent stores, it's all there. And my hope is that those who want to be successful, and I believe there are a lot of people, a lot of high potentials there that want to be successful. I'm really hoping that this book will give them the inspiration. I know it has the tools. It'll give them the inspiration. It'll tap into their intrinsic motivation, give them that push to start being successful today and turn one day I'm going to do this and one day I'm going to do that. Let's turn that one day and make today day one.
Wonderful. Talk inspiration for our aspirations. Love it.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I really appreciate your time today, and I know this is super useful to everyone who's watching and those that will reach later. So congratulations again on such a very useful, inspiring piece of work. Take good care, and
Thank you.
see you again soon, I hope.
Bye, everyone.